you hear a lot about magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and ayahuasca during the last years. That it's actually becoming mainstream. That is one of the modalities that is very prevalent at the moment, but it's not necessarily required in order to get there. And that's one of the most important things. There's many paths to get to that place of more of you, more enlightenment, more of the truth of who you are and what you can do. I use magic mushrooms to actually um, condensate 20 years of personal development before that were in theory, that it made sense in theory in my mind, but I didn't get to experience in another level. And I needed the help at that time, what I considered the help of my higher self, to make sense of everything that I've learned and why did I had to learn them. And I got the messages that I needed, not the ones that I wanted. Because every time I set an intention for that, I didn't get exactly what my intention was. I always got what I needed at that point. The space of unconditional love, because that's where I go when I take medicines. I go to a place with my higher self where I'm being introduced back to the out of the matrix, I would say, with unconditional love. That's the first thing that happens. It's unconditional love. Sit here, we'll give you a lesson. Like the waiting room has unconditional love in it. You don't need anything else. That's what you all need all the time. You need to remember unconditional love because everything stems from there. And from that perspective, when you start to allow yourself, allow it, not doing, being unconditional love, you remember. You remember that you have access to everything. And you can go from total shame to total ecstasy if you want in a second, if that's what you allow yourself to go. Most people won't. Most people will not allow themselves, either because they don't know they can. Most people don't know they can. But most people do not believe that it can get to being without the doing and the having, because that's the conditioning that we have right now. The conditioning is that you need to be productive, then I'm going to give you something. And as soon as you get something, you can allow yourself to be something. I had chronic pains in the past, and I wouldn't say magically, I would say mechanically. They were removed as soon as I acknowledged them and I integrated them. So instead of having the separation and go like, why are you there? Why are you always there? Like in a mirror, like complaining to a mirror. You wouldn't complain to a mirror. The mirror will always show you the same thing. It would always show you reflection. As soon as you integrate the reflection, you go like, oh, this is a message. This is just a message of disalignment of whatever I need to be doing. It has no judgment whatsoever saying, you are bad, you are not enough, you are a victim, blah, blah, blah. Those are all stories of the mind, stories of the ego. It has nothing to do with the mechanics of it. The mechanics of it is that you can integrate it. And it's the lesson. The lesson is in the integration. When I see people deciding to become more they just decided to be more and to be enough, and it changes everything. I mean, if that is not miracles, I don't know what is.
Greetings and good day. This is The Channeled Truth. I'm your host, Thomas Leihart, and I'm a channeler myself, and I love exploring the works of Seth and Jane Roberts, Abraham-Hicks, and Bashar. And with me today, we have a very special guest that is returning. He was with us for episode 19, and is with us again today to talk and discuss this whole idea of permission slips and this quality of allowing and being as compared to doing and having. So we're going to have a lively discussion on these topics. But first of all, let's bring Adrian onto the show. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Great. So we're going to launch into this idea of talking about permission slips, because we both have noticed that in the world of spirituality, people really get attached to certain means or methods or rituals or, prescriptions, and just that whole quality of getting caught up in that and thinking, okay, if this works for me, then this must work for you, and let me convince you. And if you're not doing this, you're not really going to get there, right? There's a lot of this crosstalk out there, and so we want to dispel that. So let's dive into that. Adrian, do you have some experiences you want to share on that front?
Oh, I get many.
I'm
I can
sure.
start with well, I'm going to give you a little bit of background if you haven't heard episode 19. My name is Adrian Bolosin. I'm a coach based in Montreal, Canada. I do most of my coaching in French, so excuse me if my English is not perfect. It's my third language. But I'll do my best to communicate whatever message we want to communicate and channel today. Um, One of the first things that I talk about during coaching is the difference between being, doing, and having. Like most of us during our lifetime, we want to either accumulate experiences or accumulate stuff or live, emotional stuff. And most people are talking about doing. Like the physical realm is all about doing, like acting. Whatever you're going to put in is what you're going to get back, right? So we're talking about a lot of modalities. You were using other words to say the same things, but at the end of the day, taking actions, we have many, many, many words to talk about what an action is. We can say a modality, we can say a recipe, we can say a truth, we can say a path. Whatever word you're going to put to an action, it's going to be the same intention behind it, right? It's I want to do something in order to get a reaction from the world. So action reaction, which is an universal law of the universe. But most people get caught up into the am I doing the right thing? Like which modality is right, right? Is this going to work or is that going to work? If I do this, if I don't do it, what's going to happen? And when you begin doing a lot of personal development and going more so into the spirituality theme of personal development, even though everything is spirituality, if we go to the separation in that field of spirituality within personal development, people think that you need to do a lot of things to get the results that you want, like to get enlightenment. As an example, you hear a lot about magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and ayahuasca during the last years. That it's actually becoming mainstream. You can see it you can see it in Netflix right now. You can see it in YouTube, like you can see it in Gaia. Everybody's talking about it because those are modalities or shortcuts to get to other places that we already have access to, but we don't know the path to get there, right? So that is one of the modalities that is very prevalent at the moment, but it's not necessarily required in order to get there. And that's one of the most important things we hear in the realms of personal development and spirituality, that you need to do this in order to get to that. And I think it's one of I think it's important and it's real. It does happen. It helps, but it's not necessarily required to get there. Some people get, there's many paths to get to that place of more of you, more enlightenment, more of the truth of who you are and what you can do and what powers do you get when you're born here as a human being.
Yeah, that reminds me of a phrase from Neem Karoli Baba, right? He said, as many beings that exist, that is how many paths there are to
Yeah.
God. And I totally agree with that, right? Because even in the course of one life, as you're living your linear time experience, you might come across many different permission slips, right? In your 20s, maybe maybe it was something like psychedelic mushrooms. In your 30s, maybe it's, meditation and following a certain guru. In your 40s, maybe it becomes, oh, I'm listening to, channeled material, Seth and Bashar and Abraham, right? So it changes even for one person, right? So this whole idea that like I found something that works for me. Now let me convince you that you need this too, right? It's like the medicine that's required for each person is different, and it even changes over time, right? So what you thought was the thing that's going to take you there is no longer that thing, 10 years later, or maybe even next week, right? So we have to really loosen up our attachment to the tools, use the tools by all means, and be ready to let them go, right? When something else is required. It's like medicine, right? Like when the patient changes, the prescription has to change too, right? We
Yeah,
deal
there you go.
with that a lot in Chinese medicine, is modifying the treatment, right? Same, these permission slips will take you a certain way, and maybe they'll take you just one step, maybe 3 steps, maybe 10 steps, right? But at some
Yeah,
point, it might be not even necessary or even detrimental at that point, right?
obviously, yeah. And sometimes you kind of feel that you learned what you needed to learn, so you don't need that permission slip anymore. To give you an example, I use magic mushrooms to actually um, condensate 20 years of personal development before that were in theory, that it made sense in theory in my mind, but I didn't get to experience in another level, and I needed the help at that time, what I considered the help of my higher self, to make sense of everything that I've learned, and why did I had to learn that, like why did was I passionate about that. And I got the messages that I needed, not the ones that I wanted. Because every time I set an intention for that, I didn't get exactly what my intention was. I always got what I needed at that point. So you know what? When people go, we're gonna set an intention, and even when you're trying to do it with dreams, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't have to work all the time. But one thing is for sure, you will always get what you need, not necessarily what you want. So you can use
Yeah.
whatever modality and permission slip you want. Just try them. Try whatever comes into your field of intention and imagination.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. You get what you need, not what you always want. And that has been a really powerful learning for me, a deep embodiment in the last, couple of weeks, really, right? It's really been dawning. Maybe it's this, this eclipse season or whatever, right? This new insight is not so much, it's like we really, even though we understand Bashar's formula, especially no insistence on a particular outcome, we still just, our culture trains us into this idea of, what you put out is what you get back, and so therefore I let me act in this way to get a certain result, right? that's it's so part of our society, and lately I've been just really letting go on a deeper level that, just act or don't act. Actually, let's take it even to the frequency behind action, which is being, right? And just be that frequency, and actually just allow things to come. That doesn't mean there's no action. There's still action, but it's this surrendered action, right? It's almost challenging to quantify into words, but like, be that frequency and just relax. And oftentimes I get this image like you're running around town making things happen, and all those things that are trying to get to you are trying to catch up to you, but you're too busy doing other things
Yeah,
because you think you need to do those things, right? But you finally, like, you slow down, you sit down on a park bench, you take a few deep breaths, and you start appreciating life. And all of a sudden, things start catching up and things start falling into place and synchronicities start happening, right? So
there you
it's
go.
that quality of like just slowing down to speed up, right? Bashar often says that. So yeah, it sounds like you have some things to add to that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Is it okay to curse?
Sure.
Um, it's well, I was saying, I just like the word fuck, and in many aspects, because you can use it the way you want. Like, you can use it in all contexts. But if you want to mind fuck yourself, know that you're always taking action. Always. There's no. It's impossible not to take action. Like, it's impossible not to have feeling, even though you're not feeling, or you don't think that you're feeling something. What you're feeling is probably neutrality, which is a feeling. And when you're standing still, you're actually, people tend to mix the actions and the being, most of the time, just because of the etymology of a word. But just to give you an example, stand still and be still, which one are you? Are you still, or you're standing still? Like, standing still is an action, right? Being still is, it's a it's who you are. So most of the time we mixed up the beings with the doings. And sometimes you need to act still. You need to be still. That's what you need to do. It's not do an action that is moving your body. It's as if go meditate while you're doing a marathon. I think that's moving and meditating at the same time. Some people do it, by the way. It actually works. It works on me. When I walk, I can meditate. But it's not the same thing as standing still, not moving a muscle, and getting to forget your body because you are doing standing still. So that's an action. Most people say, well, if I don't move my body, I'm not doing anything. No, wrong. You're always doing something. And because you don't separate the being from the doing, you don't perceive it, but you are doing. It's like procrastination is not doing what you need to do. No, procrastination is doing something to soothe yourself because you're in a stress position. That's what it is. So you're doing something else, period. Factually.
Yeah, and some of the things you're saying is, since I teach the Qigong arts, we have this quality, the yin and the yang, the polarity, but then subdividing it into 4 phases. And one of the ways to translate that is motion within motion, motion within stillness, stillness within motion, and then stillness within stillness, right? Different qualities of practice and meditation. And sometimes you can be very active in the mind, even in a visualization, but be very still on the outside, and vice versa. You can be moving on the outside and have stillness, right? So you get the idea. There's those four distinct phases, and just having that understanding that a lot of the practices, they have these different components, but also how we live our life. Like, can we bring that quality of stillness and spaciousness into everything that we do,
Yeah,
right? That's the
exactly.
challenge.
Yeah, and give it as much power as doing something or doing something more actively. Like standing still for a sniper is a life or death situation, right? If you're a sniper in the army, you're not going to move a muscle. That's your job. Don't be detected. Don't move a muscle. Just pull the trigger. Like the least action you can make, the better it is in that context, right? I know it's a war context, but you get the idea. In some contexts, standing still is what you need to do. And us as humans, there's some people who need to stay still, like they actually need it for that's natural for them. And there's more hyperactive people that need to move all the time. Well, there are hyperactive people that find it hard to stand still, have something to uncover in the stillness, whereas the people that are always stay still have something to learn in the movement. If you really want to explore everything, right?
Absolutely.
So it's really knowing what actions, like what permission slips that you're gonna accept, and knowing that both of them have gifts within them.
Yes, and it's finding the balance, right? It's having that quality of knowing what is the ideal situation, right? It's like, is this the time to stand still, right? Is this the time to move forward? There's that, it's like that song, right? There's a time for everything, right? In martial arts, there's this quality of, it's time to move, or it's time to recede, right? It's time to hold space and be still, right? So these qualities of recognizing and playing off of, where we're at in our journey is so beautiful, right? Lately, I've been noticing the beauty of sitting and allowing, right? Because Bashar is so like go, 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 action, action, act on the formula, act on your passion, right? But, something you said earlier, you have to be that frequency. You have to know your passion, the true passion,
Yeah,
and not these anxieties, right? The
yeah,
procrastinations and the distractions, right? Because we feel uncomfortable, coping mechanisms. Oh, I think that thing will make me happy, so let me do that, and I'm going to call it my passion, but it's actually just anxiety, right? So just being really clear on that, coming back to stillness, coming back to like, this is my frequency, this is my truth, and you recognize you already have all of it. It's like you already are everything. Everything exists here and now, right? You exist. And when you can rest in that, all of a sudden you're overflowing with energy, and that flows into the action. And then that starts the ball rolling, right? What you put out is what you get back, but what you're putting out is the frequency of fullness. I am that. therefore you get that reflection, right? Otherwise, when you're coming from emptiness in the sense of, I don't have it, I lack it, so let me go out there and get it. Now it's duality, it's separation, it's out there, I need to do something to get it. But I'm coming from a place of, I don't have it, right? So now the work that is required is this compounds, and now you have to deal with process, right? And then finally you realize, you are that, and then you have that, right? But that can be a long circuitous, hard-working way of going about it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think the fastest way is the Bashar way. From everything that I've learned, every content that I've read over the last 23 years, Bashar's formula, all the formulas, the formulas for the experience, as well as the formula for being in your passion and getting what you want, is the straightest line that you can get, which is just aligning yourself with your passion, doing whatever it's passionate at that moment to the best of your abilities, being as honest and authentic as possible, and then going to the maximum without any expectations until you cannot do it anymore. And that moment, some people have so many expectations about the formula itself. So they go like, I'm using the formula. How come I'm not getting something? Well, you just have an expectation right there. Oh yeah, I have an expectation about the formula now. So it's not even about what's going to happen if you follow the formula. It's the formula itself. So we always get caught up into the old paradigms of what I call the masculine productive world, which is do more, be more productive, be in action, do it. Like it's always, I'm gonna get something after doing it, and for sure you're gonna get it, but is it really that important that you're getting it rather than you're feeling it? I'm gonna give you an example. Is there something that's not allowing yourself to be happy or content or enough or being 100% on self-esteem and loving yourself right now if you didn't do anything? Like, I allowed myself to be all of that, to love myself, to be in 100% confidence and 100% self esteem just because. And you can't do anything about it. I'm going to read that one. You cannot do anything about it if I decide that. Like, you, Thomas, cannot do anything about it. So it's not about the doing. It's never about the doing. It's about an internal decision to be. And once I'm being, well, it's going to change my state of being. And from that state of being, my actions will change. My actions will be in accordance and coherence with the state of being that I'm creating right there. So, what was the effort? What was what did I do actually? Yes, I took a decision, but did I actually move a muscle to do it? The answer is no. I was probably sitting down.
Yeah, no, I could totally relate to that because I've been riding these waves of creativity, and well, most creatives know that creativity comes in waves, right? As most things in physical realm. And so I'd be riding on a high when there was a lot of creativity and output and just, oh my God, I'm feeling all this creativity and channeling it and creating it, form out of energy. And oh, this is great. Look at that. Right. And then there'd be periods where, the crest and the trough, right? The ebb and the flow, right? Which is one of our other guests, Andra, talked about a lot. Right. And then you go into the ebb and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have a couple days, I have this one day specifically, like let's say, oh, I don't have anything to do. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, I'm kind of bored. I'm kind of sad. There's no creativity. I don't know what my next project is. Right. And I started catching myself like, wait a minute. Is my value based on creative output? It's like, oh, yeah. Here it is. There's the hook.
There you go.
And then
that's the collective belief system hitting you again.
exactly. And it actually reminds me when I was reading The Magical Approach, a Seth book, right? He talks about that too. It's that quality of having value from being, right? It's like coming back to that essence, and it's layers. Sometimes it seems like it's layers. It's like you hear it and it sounds good and like, yep, I get that. And then in practice, you flush out all the times that you don't do that. And that's the journey.
Can I give you my perspective on that? What
Absolutely.
I've realized after a couple of trips
Yeah, sure.
is it's really hard to understand what unconditional love means. Like if our true self is bathing in a spa of unconditional love right now, but our body is here as a proxy representative or ambassador of our higher self, we're in the viscosity of the third dimension, looking at it from a fifth dimension and all the other dimensions. Um, in in here, time is present, and everything takes time, and it takes effort, and it's action, reaction, and such. But where we come from, everything is bathed in pure love, and unconditional love creates everything, like the good, the bad, whatever. Even the judgment that you're making has been created and allowed to exist because everything, like, people don't understand what everything plus unconditional means. Everything plus unconditional means that everything goes, everything is valid. And I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying valid. So as soon as you start invalidating something, you cannot use it anymore, and it's gonna be against you. Always, it's always going to be against you. Why not try something else? Why not integrate everything by using unconditional love on yourself first, so you can be a representative of the unconditional love, so you can allow everything to be available for you when you act on your passion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's like that quality of unconditional love. We talk about it in all kinds of contexts, spiritual contexts, whatnot. But the paradox is that there has to be unconditional love in order to allow everything that is to be, including exploration of the darkness. Some lifetimes and some, certain time periods, heavy exploration of extreme darkness, right? And it takes unconditional love. We're so unconditionally loved that, we can choose bondage, we can choose darkness, we can choose heinous acts and act them out, right? And explore that darkness. And that has value, even though it's not something I would prefer to choose, right? But certainly we can learn from it. And how many people have experienced extreme darkness only to come into extreme qualities of light, right? When you look at the masters, or great spiritual teachers, like, they have sometimes passed through great darkness, right? To bring, to come into the light. So the spirit uses everything, right? Nothing goes to waste. Everything has value, even if just for the sheer idea of contrast, right? To be able to see the candle flame against great darkness, right? So yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
I think the mastering of the neutral position, which is the things that Bashar said, like, oh, how interesting, like just that, like, oh, there's violence here, how interesting. Oh, there's peace here, oh, how interesting. uh and the so what, like the question, like, oh my god, look at this, no, so what?
Mm-hmm.
Then the what's going to happen after you answer this so what is only your belief systems. It's the only thing that's going to pour out of your mouth. It's going to be beliefs, blah blah blah. Here are my beliefs. And one of the things that I've one of the things that I realized after living the space of unconditional love, because that's where I go when I take medicines. I go to a place with my higher self where I'm being introduced back to the out of the matrix, I would say, with unconditional love. That's the first thing that happens. It's unconditional love. Sit here, we'll give you a lesson. Like the waiting room has unconditional love in it. You don't need anything else. And they just, I'm going to give you an example of one of the trips that I had. Made me sit for probably 20 minutes. So I'll be right there with you. Made me sit in a waiting room, light waiting room, with bathing by unconditional love for 20 minutes. And I was like, I cannot take this anymore. It's so much beauty. Like, it's too much. I can feel it in my body. Like, it's way too much. I'm gonna explode from love. And then my higher self came and went like, you wanted to speak with me, but I think we're done. Send me right back. That's what you all need all the time. You need to remember unconditional love because everything stems from there. And from that perspective, when you start to allow yourself, allow it, not doing, being unconditional love, you remember. You remember that you have access to everything. You remember that you have access to all the beings, all the state of beings that you want. Like you see in the scale of Dr. Hawkins, like that's one of the scales that explains like the levels of consciousness and emotional experience that you're gonna have as a human, and you can go from total shame to total ecstasy if you want in a second, if that's what you allow yourself to go. Most people won't. Most people will not allow themselves, either because they don't know they can. Most people don't know they can, but most people do not believe that it can get to being without the doing and the having, because that's the conditioning that we have right now. The conditioning is that you need to be productive, then I'm going to give you something, and as soon as you get something, you can allow yourself to be something, which is not, it's not it's not the right path. It's not how it really works. It doesn't work that way. That's an illusion. The real work is being, doing, and having, that in that order.
Yes, and something that's been really dawning on me as this kind of unique facet of the crystal is being. You know, when you come into being, you already, it's like you go into that timeless space, right, of unconditional love, and you already are everything. You already have everything. Everything exists here and now. But not just as a mental construct, but you really feel the sense of this rich completion, like I am complete, right? And then that overflows into the doing. And then having is just a side effect. It's a reflection, right? It's the trinkets of physical reality, right? But you already are in a state of consciousness, right? And
Exactly.
something Bashara talks about a lot is the motivational mechanism, right? That we're always moving towards pleasure and away from pain, right? The quality of being, it's almost like there's a third point of neutrality that comes in where you don't have to do in order to get, you don't have to move away from or towards anything because you already are everything, right? And that from that place, now action is just the pure joy of acting, right? It's not like, oh, let me do this thing because I want that thing over there, and then I'll give myself permission to be happy once I achieve that, right? Which is usually the way we're trained into, right? You got to get all these things, and oh, then you can be happy, right? Usually, when you see someone just blatantly ecstatic on the street for seemingly uncaused reasons, we kind of label them as crazy, right? What's wrong with you, man? It's like, we think we need an excuse to be happy, right? But it's like putting the cart, it's like putting the things in the right order, like you're saying, being, cultivate being, cultivate that quality of connection. And then the actions, it doesn't have the charge anymore. Like, I need this to happen or I need that to be happy, right? It's just all that just starts falling away, and just what a grace and what a beauty when that does.
Absolutely. There's another thing that came up to me the other day when I was sick. I was, as soon as your body's sick, is trying, the body will block some of the capacities of feeling the need to become something, because it's going into the dark contraction phase, and you actually live in contraction, even if you want it. Like, you can say, I'm totally happy right now, but I feel like shit. Like, you can be happy and not feel it, not be able to feel it, because the body's in contraction, the body's going into the dark. Like, it's taking you with them at the same time. Like, I haven't been able myself to get out of either sickness or well, I don't stay in sickness very long. Like, I can work myself out of sickness. It's not automatic. Some people just don't get sick because they're super high in consciousness, and they just don't they never go into the ease of the body. But myself, I know that I tend to forget when my body is sick that I can do all of those things. So, keeping a healthy body, healthy mind, it's always recommended, no matter what.
And the paradox of being sick, I've noticed, is because I went through periods, long years of never getting sick, and be like, oh, I'm a qigong practitioner, right? I've got strong wei qi and like all these things, and all that's great, right? But like last couple of years, I've gotten sick pretty intensely, right? A couple of times, and I started realizing being sick is like a shamanic journey, right? It's like you go into the underworld and you work through some things, you let some things go. All of a sudden, those things that your hang-ups fall away. And then it's like I'm realizing, okay, this is a tool that has been orchestrated at some level, and there's this deep learning at a very accelerated rate, even though it's very uncomfortable for the moment. I pop out of those and it's like I feel like a completely reborn new person. And the process has been really condensed in this really intense phase of being sick. And so it's like even now I don't label it as like, oh, like I'm not spiritual enough. Like forget that, right? It's like, man, it's like apparently that was the most productive, or not productive, but the easiest path, as paradoxical as that sounds, is to get from point A to point B, to move into a realization, right? So just, yeah, even just trusting the way our life unfolds is just amazingly powerful.
Absolutely. There was another thing that came up this week, so I'm sure it's super fresh in my mind, so I'm sharing it. Is the fact that we can live either in sickness or in pain or emotional, I would say emotional damage, but uh, in contraction, you can live all of that without suffering. Um, Suffering. Let's say you knew that suffering was a lesson. How much suffering do you actually need to get it? Like, how much time do you need to spend in suffering in order to know that suffering is suffering? I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to make you suffer 1 minute. Do you think that if I make you suffer 30 years, it will be a different suffering? Do you think it's going to be a different flavor of suffering? Most people think so. Most people believe so. So they stick into the suffering without acknowledging that you can get out of suffering because, all right, I know what it is. I'm gonna stop this shit. I'm gonna stop it. I just don't need it anymore. I get the message. Now I'm just gonna allow myself not to suffer anymore, even though there's pain there, and just go like, oh, there is pain. Ouch. But I'm not gonna suffer.
Yeah, that's a very valuable point. As I've heard that phrase before, pain can be a part of life, but suffering is optional, right?
It is. It is. But it's hard if you don't know it. It's actually it isn't possible if you don't know it. It's not possible to take action from a place that you don't know. So it is important for, I would say, light beings or more conscious beings just to set an example to show them that it is possible to live with pain without suffering. I had chronic pains in the past, and I wouldn't say magically, I would say mechanically. They were removed as soon as I acknowledged them and I integrated them.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having the separation, go like, why are you there? Why are you always there? Like in a mirror, like complaining to a mirror.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Totally.
You wouldn't complain to a mirror. The mirror will always show you the same thing. It would always show your reflection. So even if you cry about the reflection, even if you start putting makeup on the reflection, it's still a reflection. So as soon as you integrate the reflection, you go like, oh, this is a message.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a message of disalignment of whatever I need to be doing. It has no judgment whatsoever saying, you are bad, you are not enough, you are a victim, blah, blah, blah. Those are all stories of the mind, stories of the ego. It has nothing to do with the mechanics of it. The mechanics of it is that you can integrate it. And it's the lesson. The lesson is in the integration,
I
accepting
totally,
it.
absolutely, because it's like I circle through this time and again. It's like the body, the relationship to the body, and working in the qigong healing arts. Every time I have a pain in the body, right, it's like I come to that choice. I can resist it, I can live with it, or I can bring my consciousness into it. And every time I bring my consciousness into it, magic happens, right? But like you said, it's not really magic, it's mechanics, right? It's when you bring your consciousness into these areas of resistance in the body, things unfold, messages unfold, realizations. Sometimes really old memories come to the surface that you didn't realize you were holding on to. And it's just, it becomes its own shamanic journey, right? It's like, no medicine's required, but by all means, if you feel called to, you can do it that way too, right? But, going
Absolutely.
into the pain, like we're so
Yeah.
taught to avoid, right? And the more you avoid, the bigger it gets, the signal's getting louder because your body wants your attention, right? And you're like, oh, let me take these medications, let me numb it out, let me forget about it, right? So it's like you're just, oh man, it compounds, right? But the paradox of going into pain is it's pure magic. But you have to get right into the center. It's like you're playing with your mind and you're really local. You just really got to focus into the core of it, and then it just starts to unwind and starts revealing many things to you on many levels: energetic level, emotional level, physical level. There's a message in there. It's trying to get through to you. So why not just answer the call, right?
Absolutely. You know what? It makes me think, if I think about where the world is going. Well, my world is going. It's going in a direction where in 200 years, this conversation is basic shit.
It's
It's basic
obsolete,
stuff.
totally.
Like this is what we teach kids in school. This is how the body works. This is how your system works. This is all of your system works. This is how all your 12 chakras work and how they're connected to the 12 system. This is our DNA is connected together. And everything is basic. It's not that hard to understand when you think about the mechanics of it. It's really, really, really hard if you make it hard,
Mm-hmm.
or it's really, really hard if you think that the path from where you are right now in the unknown, getting to the known of the mechanics is hard. Like all the information that you and I are sharing has been available for what, 30, 40 years.
If not
I mean,
thousands
it's
of
right there.
years in certain
Even
contexts.
thousands of years, and,
But
and, and it's cycling, right? So
totally.
I believe that if you look back 100 years in medicine, I mean, it's night and day. 100 years in the future with us right now, it's gonna be night and day with the AI and the robots. And if the world doesn't explode or implode, I mean, I think it's gonna be very, very positive. We're going in the right way. Well, it depends. Some people know. Some people going in the negative. We're going to the light. So, but you know what I'm saying. This is. It seems for me when I talk about this and when I see the results on my clients and when I see people deciding to become more just because they just decided to be more and to be enough, and it changes everything. I mean, if that is not miracles, I don't know what is, because the definition of a miracle is something that you did not expect it could happen, right? So if you didn't expect that you could be happy in a decision, well, that happens. If you didn't expect that you can act on something that you were scared to do, well, that happens. If you didn't expect to change your behavior and change your personality on a decision, well, shit, I've seen that like many, many times over and over, just because people decided that they're enough, because they say, well, if I really come from unconditional love, why am I not loving myself? Why am I not allowing myself to be who I want to be? Because of judgment, because of opinions, of culture, because of what my religion is saying, all those stories that we bathe in, because we're bathing into co-creative stories. I mean, if you want to empower yourself, power, put power into it. Like, give yourself power. Why? Because you fucking can. That's why. Just do it. Try it. You will see. There's miracles behind it, and it's easier than you think.
Absolutely. And it always comes back to self-love, unconditional self-love, and loving self because we exist, right? Existence means you have value within the symphony of life because you exist. It comes back to that fundamental idea of, it's like Bashar's, the 5 laws of existence. The first one is you exist, right? You always have and you always will. And then from there it expands, right? But you have to come back to existence. If you exist, you're valuable, right? And then just build everything on that rather than continuing to build upon, lacking value, needing to prove value, needing to behave in a certain way so that you can receive a reflection of value from others, right? Validation, right? So all that nonsense, right? It becomes very nonsensical when you stand upon your existence. This is who I am. I exist and I have value because I exist. End of story, right? And build from there, have fun from there. So Adrian, I feel like we could totally go on, and this is a lovely train to be on. Like you said earlier, right? Some are heading into the darkness and some are heading into the light and everything in between, but this is a fabulous train ride, is getting on that train of just self-love and having that self-value because you exist, right? So step into that world, and may this episode out there inspire people to step into that trueness of who you are, and just be that, live that, and come from being. Let the doing be secondary as a result of just being who you are. And that's it,
exactly.
right? End of story. So
if I can add something before we end, one of the
sure.
things that there's a lot of people that think there is an end, a result that you need to, to check that, okay, I'm going to have I'm going to have a pretty house. I'm going to have a dog, a wife, or a husband, and I'm going to be rich and this and that and blah, blah, blah. I got so many clients that checked all the lists, all the doings, all the havings. They've done it all and they have it all, and they still not the people they want to be. And I got
Absolutely.
people that didn't do that and that don't have that are what those people are seeking. So to tell you the truth, there is no finite destination in life. Is the present moment. What do you want in your present moment at every moment? And just be as excited as you can in the present moment, going towards something that excites you even more, to discover what's going to unfold. And you'll see that even in the unknown, the only thing that you're gonna discover is more of you. And I know, because that's what I've been doing for the past 17 years. So it's greater and greater and greater and greater. It just gets greater. It doesn't get like, oh, there's a plateau here for a while. No, it always gets. If you go up a stair, you're always going to be up, 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 up. There's going to be more eternally. So get into the eternal train instead of going to a train that has a destination. There is no destination. Just chill, lighten up. There is no destination. Chill. There's nowhere to go. You're going in circles. Just get the circle more fluently, with the least resistance and the least pain as possible. You don't have to suffer while you're going while you're doing this. You don't have to suffer, and that's my message. That's what I want to bring the world. You don't need to suffer while you're doing this mechanics.
Great. So thank you for adding that in. So many things to play off of, but I'll just let your words stand as they are and be the powerful communicator of that frequency. And let's do this again and have you on another episode. And may this inspire everyone out there to really step into that light and to realize that each moment is this is it, right? This is the eternal now moment. So be happy now, right? Rather than thinking you need to achieve all these things to be happy, to give yourself an excuse to be happy or permission, right? Give yourself permission now because you exist. So with that, we'll be signing off, and we will see you in the next episode.